I think about these days, all I think about these days is getting at that goal that's in my heart. I need a reason to believe, yeah, maybe a cure for my disease.
That song is by Blaine Long. My name is Matthew Blades. Meet my friends.
Hi, it's Tim.
And Beth from the Mulhausen Group Real Estate.
We are so proud to sponsor another episode of Learn from People Who Lived It. You can catch us at tmgphoenix.com.
That's a good group of people right there. Hi, it's Matthew Blades, host of Learn from People Who Lived It. And a reminder before we get into today's show that each of these episodes is presented uninterrupted with the support of the Mulhausen Group, with the support of ASI or Advanced Systems Integrations. They design and install cutting-edge audio and visual equipment. So if you're on the IT staff or you're the IT director, please reach out to ASI. This audio-visual integrator has offices in Minnesota and in Scottsdale and 2 decades of experience. And the cool thing about them, they pay real close attention to that last 5%, which is the one that drives you and I crazy. We've got a link to ASI in our show description, or you can go there yourself by visiting asi-av.com.
Welcome to another episode of Learn from People Who Lived It.
Topher, and I'm 43 years old.
Topher, what story are you here to share?
Well, I'm here to share my background and, the experiences that I've had growing up with, a mother who was severely mentally disabled, and how that kind of brought me to where I am here today, and hoping that, my experiences and the things that I talk about, others will be able to hear that and maybe relate to that.
So building on that a little, who do you hope hears this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a lot of folks out there. Everybody's got a story, and everybody has an interesting background. But what I'm hoping for is that those that hear this are ones that have grown up in a turbulent background and have their own experiences similar. Or maybe they've known somebody who's been in the same situation. That's who I'm hoping to reach.
Welcome to another episode of Learn from People Who Lived It. Dr. Frank along for the ride. Good afternoon to you, sir.
How are you?
I'm awesome. I always love it when 3 guys get together to talk about their feelings. It's something, I mean that with my whole heart, right? It just doesn't happen enough. And so I can't wait. As I was getting ready for this episode, I've been sitting on this idea of blue collar therapy, and you're both in the space. So let me shake this out with you a little bit, right? But this idea that how can you make things so easy to digest that really anybody can get their head around it? And if there's a theme to today's episode with Topher, it's that you can go through some real bad stuff, but your life doesn't have to suck because of it. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So Topher, welcome to our podcast. I'm thrilled you're here, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm definitely stoked to be here with you and Dr. Frank. It's amazing. I love what you guys are doing and how you're helping. It's absolutely epic.
Thanks, man. That makes us both feel pretty good. So we love to start 0 to 10. And if you could give us an idea of what's going on in Topher's life from the beginning until you're in about the 5th grade.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's, 43 years old. That's a ways back.
Dig deep.
Yeah, dig deep. Growing up, first of all, I was born in an Army hospital up in Washington, and my mom abruptly left my biological father, who was in the Army at the time, and moved me and my older brother. He was a year and 2 months older than me, to Arizona. So I pretty much grew up here in Arizona. Went to multiple schools out here, multiple high schools, certainly. But yeah, so I consider myself an Arizona native, even though I wasn't born here. But, growing up, up until 5th grade, to be honest with you, I can tell you this. I know I went to 4 different 5th grade schools. And that has to tell you something. Yeah, absolutely. So that in itself kind of shows the insecurities growing up as a kid. And looking back now as an adult, you kind of reflect on that. And it's not negative ruminating at all. It's more of a, what was going on back then? And now I get it as an adult. Like, okay, so this is what this means. So growing up, a single mother, when I was really young, I know she remarried. We had a stepdad for a little while who was abusive, physically abusive. He used a lot of drugs. Now that I can remember that, but that relationship in itself didn't last long between her and my stepfather. But it was always just me and my brother is what I always just remember growing up. And we were very, very close. And it wasn't the typical older brother, younger brother relationship where it's like, oh man, you're annoying, get away. We were very, we did a lot of things together. And we always felt like it was like me and him, right? Like we had to survive all these things is what it felt like. And so growing up, living in poverty, living in very poor neighborhoods, living in studio apartments from one apartment to the next. I know that there was, chronic evictions and there was nights where we didn't eat or waking up in the morning to go to school and seeing your mom kind of passed out.
Let me ask you a question. You mentioned your closeness with your brother. Are you guys ever are you in your bedroom late at night going like, what the fuck is going on? Like, what is all this? Like, are you guys having these conversations?
Like as a kid, no, because you don't recognize that, right? You're in this life. And certainly as a kid, you can't articulate that. Like, what the hell is going on with mom? Why is she not home right now? Why hasn't she been home in 3 days? And you're wondering, well, we can eat this ramen noodle we have. And, we can, I guess we don't have to go to school because nobody's telling us to go to school.
But there wasn't anybody else. So there wasn't really anybody else around. There wasn't a grandma, grandpa. There was no aunt and uncle, friend, cousin. There was nobody really stepping in to fill in the gaps.
Nope. It was just us. And, backstory a little bit on my mom. So just to kind of describe and to paint the environment. So my mom grew up in a rough environment as well. So I learned that her father had passed away while he was in jail from an assault. Her mom committed suicide. Her mom was severely bipolar. And inevitably, my mom was severely bipolar too, was her mental health condition and substance abuse. So my mom grew up in foster care. She grew up moving around a whole bunch. So her life growing up was very toxic and very unstable. So that carried over into her having me and my brother, and that way of chaos, that normality of chaos growing up. She just carried that into her adult life.
You guys are kids and you're going from one place to the next. I mean, does she come to the room and how does she explain, or what does she say about why we have to leave or where we have to go? Or can you just let us into that world a little bit?
No, it wasn't, from what I can remember, like growing up as a kid, the communication wasn't there. It wasn't like, hey, I lost my job again, or she's strung out and her whole world falls apart, and financially, there's no money. So it was more of always, I'm sorry, and always the apologies, and the anger and the lability of her mood, not knowing who you're going to wake up and see. Are you going to see the mom who loves you, or are you going to see the mom who's angry and hungover or strung out, or just not there? Right. Yeah. So growing up from being young to fifth grade, from what I remember, was just a bunch of turbulence and a bunch of chaos and people coming in and out of our lives, and the manic episodes of her disappearing for a week, going off with whoever, and the boyfriends coming in and out, and the drugs and the alcohol is from what I remember up until 5th grade. And it's just the constantly moving and the constantly wondering what's coming next. And you think about what that does to a child, right? And what that does to somebody who doesn't have that nurturing, caring parent. And so that's what made that bond between me and my brother really tight. And that's what we had, was each other. And so growing up, at least I had that. And I was thankful for that. And certainly we had friends, but we didn't have any family. No support groups whatsoever. And there was no social resources either, because my mom never sought those. So it wasn't like we had social workers coming in and going, hey, whoa, wait a second, get these kids out of here. You need help. You need to go to rehab. You need to go see a psychiatrist or a mental health provider. There was none of that.
Let me ask you a question. We just recorded an episode with a woman, Christina, who also went through something kind of similar to you, in that her mother was also mentally ill and very unstable as a child. And you remember this, Dr. Frank? She said something at one point in our podcast. She said, I grew up feeling like no mother would have been better. Did you ever feel that way?
Yeah. I felt, I think that anybody could have been a better parent than what we had. I felt emotionally that, as a child, let me ask you this, as a child, should you question whether your mom loves you or not? I mean, there's something wrong there. If you're a child and you have that thought of, does she even love me, multiple times? Because if she loved you, then why did she leave for 2 weeks at a time, a week at a time at her drug dealer's house, right? Who doesn't know why you're there or what to do with you, right? So you have to think, certainly any mother would have been better, I think. But, again, everybody has a story, right? And everybody has a situation and a scenario that they lived through. So I wouldn't want to compare, and yeah. So a couple things, big major milestones that have occurred, like when I was 11 years old. And I haven't really told many people, a lot of the story that I'm sharing now. Certainly I'm okay to talk about the experiences that I've endured, and I'm okay to talk about, the life that I've lived and how it made me who I am and brought me to where I am today. And certainly it feels better to me to get those things out. And there's some situations, some scenarios that occurred that certainly is difficult to talk about for anybody to talk about, right? When I was 11, I remember my mom's was kind of in and out with her stepdad again. And I know that he was very abusive. I remember times where, physically abusive. I remember coming home one time and he was, physically assaulting my mom in the living room, and the cops coming and that playing out. And so I remember leaving the apartment. We were living in Tempe in a really crappy, shitty apartment. And I remember coming home, it was late. I was 11 years old. And I remember walking into the front door, and Def Leppard Hysteria was super loud on the radio. And I was like, holy shit, that's super loud. So I went and turned it down, and I'm yelling, Mom, where are you? And I look in the kitchen and I notice that there's blood all over the kitchen. And I'm thinking, oh shit, what's going on? I'm freaking out. I'm 11. I don't know what to think. And I go in her room, and she's laying down on the floor, and she's got the phone in her hand, and it's got that beep, like the off the hook. And this is before cell phones, right? And it's like, rah, rah, rah. And I'm shaking her, and she's not responsive. And then I realized that she had cut her wrist as a suicide attempt. So I hang the phone up, I call 911, and they say, you know what, take a pillowcase, wrap it around her wrist, and just hold them up, and we'll come. And so I could hear the ambulance coming, and They take her to the hospital. My stepdad comes back. They release me to my stepdad. She's in the hospital for a day or two and comes back. And she's super remorseful. She's very sorry. She wants to be a good mother now. Right. And which, after an event like that, you do see that commonly where people have that regret and they have that awakening. I screwed up and I made a huge mistake. How can I repair this?
Can I just pause you really quick to ask you that night of the suicide attempt, right? And all of this is unfolding. What are you and your brother communicating to each other?
Yeah. So oddly enough, my brother when I was 11, our real father had entered back into our life, and he wanted custody of me and my brother. And he had remarried, and I was 11 years old. That was the feels like the first and the last time I ever met my biological father. And somehow he negotiated to have custody of my brother. So my brother actually had just recently moved out. He was 12 at the time and was living with our biological father in East Mesa. And so it was just me at the time. And I'm certain that contributed to what led up to the suicide attempt, because it had only been a few weeks since he had moved out. And it wasn't a cordial, he was angry at our mother. He was fed up. He was able to comprehend all the bad things. And he's like, I'm done and I'm moving out. And so it wasn't pleasant. And again, reflecting back, that certainly was a contributing factor, along with drugs and her unstable mental health. So I was alone at that time. I didn't have anybody.
You left did you stay in the hospital with your mom?
No. She was at the hospital by herself for a few days. I stayed with my stepdad.
Okay.
He stayed in the apartment with us.
Got it.
And so that did carry on. And then we moved around a bunch. And eventually she ended up getting a boyfriend that was stable. He was in AA. He was doing all the meetings. He was this positive outlook in her life. All these turbulent things that had happened, even after between age 11 and 15, I don't know how many couches we slept on. I remember sleeping in a car for about a week. I remember sleeping underneath a tree for a couple of nights with her in some apartment complex. I remember her leaving me at some random person's house for 3 weeks. And she was off on this drug bender, and they were going to actually be like, we don't know if she's coming back. So, and we got to figure out what we're going to do with you. And as a kid, you're thinking, oh my gosh, where am I going to end up? Like, am I going to a foster home?
Right.
Well, so that's what I'm wondering, right? Like when you described when you were very young, obviously it's hard to wrap your head around anything that's happening right now. But now you're in like preteen, almost teen. You're too young to like do anything about your situation, but you're old enough to understand this is not normal. This is weird.
Right.
And so what goes through your head in those like did you start trying to problem solve? Or did you just kind of ride the wave and hope you ended up, safe on a beach somewhere?
Yeah, it wasn't really my thought. From what I remember, my thought process wasn't like, how can I fix this? Because you start to understand like something's not right. Something's not normal. Yeah. And you see other kids where, they got to go home for dinner because the street lights came on, and you don't have to do that because nobody's telling you to do that. Right. You feel like nobody cares enough. Like what's dinner,
and there might not be dinner waiting for you anyway.
Right. So you start to understand that and you start to recognize that, but it's not that I want, like, as a kid, I don't think I was comprehending, like, how can I fix this? It was more of I'm very angry at you because I know this is not right. And I'm upset that, why can't we be normal? Yeah. Like, cause now I'm recognizing things are abnormal.
I want to know how that's manifesting in your life as a child that age. Are you acting out against school? Are you getting in fights? Are grades suffering? Like, what's happening there?
Yeah, no, it's definitely coming out as a kid to process that type of emotion and hurt. It would, in my case, present it as anger and not caring, and it presented as not caring about school, getting suspended constantly. I remember getting expelled for fighting, and so now I'm reaching out for that. That I'm trying to fill a void, right? So what are you going to fill that void with? You're going to fill it with whoever accepts you. And in my case, growing up in bad neighborhoods, the acceptance you're going to get is from other kids, right? That see some type of goodness in you or something. So usually I'm latching on to the bad kids in the neighborhood and, going out at night and breaking into cars and getting in fights. And I remember, my first drink of alcohol, I was 12 actually. And I remember smoking pot at an early age and experimenting. But there was nobody to tell me I couldn't do that.
Well, and it's just worth it. The reason that I wanted to go down this road was so many times you have a group of people who look at somebody like you in your situation and just want to throw the rag at them, right? Like, what the fuck is wrong with them? Get it together, dude. Stop being a troublemaker. And do you even think for a moment, Topher, the people in your life could have fathomed what your real life scenario was behind the scenes? I mean, do you think you ever had a teacher, a principal, a friend, anybody who could have fathomed what your real life was like?
I don't think so. I think it was, I was never in a place for too long anyway. So developing a relationship where anybody could recognize that and go, okay, what's going on with this kid? How can we help? Because it was more of okay, I'm in school for half a year and then we got to move somewhere else. I was always the new kid. I remember always being the new kid, never really having friends because it was hard to make friends because first of all, you have all this emotional stuff going on and you certainly aren't going to bring anybody home to hang out and play video games with because you could walk in on your mom passed out or throwing up or something like that. So, So Dr. Frank, that question of how can I solve this as a child? And I think that's the thing. Like a lot of kids, I'm sure feel that way, that, growing up in a lifestyle like that, this isn't my story, even though, it is unique. Right. And the experiences, but I'm not the only one with a story like this. I'm not the only kid out there with parents that have gone untreated. And I don't remember my mom ever having doctor's appointments. It was always just substances. And different jobs, and can she make enough money for rent, and can we get a food box with like the boxes of ramen and the fake Velveeta block of cheese and the powdered milk, right? And so I remember that pretty vividly. But so growing up, it was chaos, and that's what I was used to. That was my normal. Was a chaotic lifestyle. So that transition, when we get there, of going from growing up in a state of chaos and emotional uncertainty and the lack of love and support from a parental role, transitioning away from that in life, man, what a journey that was and how difficult that is. And something definitely worth diving into, but kind of going back to more of the story of my mom, I can understand now why she was like that growing up. Severe bipolar 1 disorder. It was her diagnosis that I learned, and those manic episodes were very, very severe. And on top of that, she had no support from family or friends. She was a single mother with 2 kids, now 1 because the other ones went to live with the father, and she was not treated. She was not on any meds or anything.
Could I ask both of you to sort of articulate a little bit bipolar and how that might look?
Well, obviously, the presentations are going to be slightly different for different people. But when we talk about, manic episode, right? Manic, it's sort of what we used to call manic depressive, right? The sort of the polar opposite, hence bipolar. Where on one end you have this euphoria, right? Where some people go and spend lots of money. Some people will go off and use drugs. Almost to this level where like you're kind of blacked out while you're doing it, right? You don't recognize sort of consciously the choices that you're making. And on the other end, there's that crash, where, depressed suicidality, right. So that person obviously has to deal with both of those extremes, but then everybody around that person, like you said, I don't know which person I'm waking up to every morning. And again, you can probably speak more to, specifically how it affected your mom, but that's the biggest, it's the instability. It's the swings from one end to the other, where at both extremes, you're doing something that's probably dangerous to both you and all the people around you. None of it's great. And that's why the medications that, help with it are literally called mood stabilizers, right? We want to avoid the largest extremes in the swings. All of us have some shifts in our mood every day, but we want to swing from like a 3 to a 7, not a 1 to a 10 every day. Mm-hmm. Topher, go ahead and add to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's a lot of the times people recognize, bipolar is kind of thrown out quite a bit, and a lot of people identify with some of those symptoms of bipolarity, and it is that up and that down. It's this, and usually you see the depressive episodes, the crash, and you have to look statistically. If you asked 100 people, hey, when was the last time you were manic? I bet you 60% of them would probably say, I'm never manic. But their people around them would be like, oh, you were manic like 2 weeks ago, dude. Like, so they don't recognize the behaviors. They don't recognize the impulses and the choices that they're making, and how that affects those around them. And, you hear of, usually it's the negative side, right? Like, when people think of bipolar, they think of, oh, well, this person went and sold their house and married some guy in Spain and moved and sold all their assets. And now they're coming back a month later and they're broke and, they're pregnant. Right. And they're like, what happened to my life? So, but it's not like that. And it's more of a spectrum of, bipolar 2 all the way to the severe bipolar 1 with psychosis. Right. And so people can identify with anywhere on that spectrum where they kind of lay and what that presents as, but it's usually that mood lability. Right. In my mom's case, bipolar 1 severe, certainly. And those manic episodes can last, in her case, from what I remember now, they can last a month or 2 at a time. And then the crash comes, and it's the isolating in her room, the drug use, the suicide attempts, the other behaviors, with depression, right? And then she comes back up, and all of a sudden she's on top of the world and impulsive and making these poor choices and these high risk behaviors and things like that. So you definitely see that in her case. But the crashes were bad, and she was chronically suicidal. That wasn't her only, that suicide attempt she had when I was 11 wasn't her only one. She had an overdose event shortly after that. And then she, on my 16th birthday, and I'd like to paint a picture between, when I was like 14 to 16, because a lot had happened during that time. And a lot had happened during that time that was good. And it wasn't always bad. So now I see a contrast of how she can be good because she got treated. She was with this boyfriend that was going to AA, that was sober, that was a positive influence in her life. and she got a job and she was working, and everything was great. And so now I see that, like I see, okay, look, there is potential here. And now I'm repairing a relationship with her. I'm starting to love her instead of being so mad at her. And I started going to school, and now I was in the same school for a whole year, and I went to the same middle school. And then I was in high school. I went to Arcadia High School my freshman year. I even played football, and I was like, this is amazing. This is the normal life. I love it. And then things started falling apart. And my brother came back into the picture, and he started living with us again. And so now I'm repairing a relationship with my brother. My brother had been gone for 5 years. I had no contact with him whatsoever. He was residing with our biological father. And so now he's back in the picture, and now we're trying to figure each other out. And, I missed you for 5 years. These are all the things that had happened, but I didn't know all the really bad things that had happened to him while he was living with our biological father, and all of the trauma that he experienced living there. And so learning that at the time while my mom was supposedly stable helped me kind of focus my attention on that with him and learn more about what he'd gone through. But I was also very confused.
Okay, so continue on with your story.
Yeah. So he's living with us, and my mom started to kind of revert back, and she left that boyfriend very, very suddenly. And she's like, I found another guy, and we're moving to Mesa, and you can't go to Arcadia high school anymore. And so now we moved back into this really bad neighborhood at Mesa, and we're living back in surprisingly back on the street that I grew up, we lived so frequently on in Mesa. So now I'm like, oh my gosh, we're back here again. We're back here. And now she's starting to use drugs again. She's starting to have those high risk behaviors. Her new boyfriend is not a healthy person in her life. She left this guy that was stable and moved us back out of that environment, back into the turbulence again. And I think, and I look back now, and that's that conditioning she had. And she grew up in that state of chaos. And so if you grow up in an environment like that and things somehow turn to be stable for you, you feel abnormal. You feel like this isn't right. There's this inner angst, and you feel uncomfortable because you're not used to the stability. You're used to the chaos. And so you'll start to self-sabotage that and revert back into what you felt was comfortable, back what you were familiar with. And so, I mean, Dr. Frank, you probably see that as well.
It's like we all have these set points, right? And they get established at some point in our lives, and it becomes the stuff that we're used to. And even though at some point we can get this idea that, you know what, something out there might be better, and we get there, and it can be a couple of things, right? Like you kind of described how you get into that situation and it feels abnormal. It feels weird. It feels uncomfortable. The chaos, even though most of us from the outside looking in would say that previous life was horrible. Like, don't go back to that. But it's what someone knows, right? And so they gravitate back. The other thing that happens is even if someone can sort of consciously say, I want this better life, sometimes they don't feel like they deserve that better life. And so you either sort of consciously or subconsciously, move away from that. I've done so many horrible things in my life. I don't deserve this great person now. I don't deserve this better life. I deserve to live out my remaining years with the crap that I built for myself. So I'm going to go back there. And again, it's not always a conscious decision. But there's a lot of pieces that contribute to making it really, really difficult to break any kind of pattern, a lifelong pattern, and especially like multi-generational patterns, really, really hard to break out of for all of those reasons and more.
But Topher did.
But
right?
Topher did.
But Topher did, right? And that's the point, right? Like I said up front, this is a guy who some bad stuff happened, but your life doesn't have to suck because of it. And yours, I don't even know if you would use that word. My life sucked for a little while, but it was certainly challenging for a long time.
Yeah.
And, but you're somebody now who, well, maybe we'll get to this a little bit later, but I mean, professionally speaking, this is your world now. You've created a company that helps people get help. Yeah. And I mean, if there's that's a success story to me. That's a journeyman. That's somebody who took the lemons and made lemonade, to use the worst cliche on planet Earth, right? But I hate
you only get to use one of those per series of ours. That's it.
If I say kudos, you come over here and punch me right now, okay? If I say kudos, you have full range, man. But yeah, that's the point. That's the point. Some things can happen to you, and then you can come out of it. And I want to get to the journey out, but we're not quite done with a couple of things that have impacted your life tremendously.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of going back into like leading up into my adulthood. So my brother's back in the picture, right? And me and him are close again. Like he's like leaning on me, I'm leaning on him. I turned 16 years old and we're living in Mesa. I'm now going to Westwood. I'm a sophomore. I have friends there. My brother, we have the same friends. And it was on my 16th birthday, and I'm at home and I'm mad at my mom because I'm like, look, I want to have friends over. Can I have $20? And she's like, I don't have $20. And she's all pissed off, and her boyfriend were fighting. And so I left the house, and me and my brother went somewhere. I don't remember where we went. And I ended up going back home. He stayed at our friend's house. And I go back home and I look on the dining room table, and her purse is sitting there. And I'm like, I'm going to get $20. And so I open up her purse, and her purse is soaking wet. And I'm like, what is this? And I smell it, and it smells like beer. And I was like, oh, dude, she's drunk. And there's a note sitting next to her purse, and it's super, super scribbly. Could hardly read it. And I'm scanning it, and I think she's in her room. And I'm looking at it, it's going, oh, dude, she's wasted. And I read it. And at the end, it says, I'm really sorry to leave you. And I was like, oh, shit, this is a suicide note. Whoa. And I go in her room, and she's convulsing on her bed. There's a whole bunch of empty pill bottles all over the nightstand. And then she just goes still. And I'm standing there, and I'm in shock, and she's not moving. And I run over there, and I shake her on the bed. And I remember the bed it was really wobbly. And I remember shaking her, and I'm yelling at her, Mom. And I see all these pills. She's totally unresponsive. And so I call 911. After finding the damn phone, I couldn't find the cordless phone to save my life, but it was in the kitchen. So I grabbed the phone, I call 911, and they're like, is she responsive? And I'm like, no, she's not. And they're like, you need to set the phone down and start doing CPR. So I'm sitting there, I put the phone down. I don't know how to do CPR. So I have the cordless on speaker, and the lady's telling me just push really hard. And I remember the bed going up and down, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm pushing hard enough. And she's like, if you can get her on the floor, get her on the floor. And I don't think I can. I'm crying, I'm hysterical. I'm alone in this house with my mom, who I've been here before. I've been here when she cut her wrist. I remember when she overdosed, and I start remembering all those things as I'm doing this, and I'm hysterical. And I can hear faintly coming down that shitty neighborhood, the ambulance. I can hear the sirens coming, and it felt like an eternity. And I remember this lady's voice, and I just remember trying to do CPR, and that siren getting louder and louder and louder in slow motion. And I remember her telling me that she can hear the ambulance, go open your door so they know where you're at. And I remember doing that, and a whole rush of fire department guys come barreling into the apartment, and I'm like, she's right there. And They pull her off the bed, and they're loud and yelling stuff, and the room just filled with people. And I remember standing just outside the doorway, and I'm watching, and I'm just, I could hardly see from all the tears and everything. And I remember them cutting her shirt open and then getting the defibrillator. And right before they were going to defib her, I remember one of the fire department guys like, oh shit, there's this kid standing right there watching this, and took me out of the apartment. And as we're walking out, I can hear them yell clear. And I heard that loud zap with a ring after it. And I'm just like, oh my God, did she just die? Like, just like that. And I just read the note, and here I am just wanting $20, and how awful I felt because I got so mad at her because I just wanted $20 on my 16th birthday. And it was bad. My brother came home and they asked like, hey, do you guys got somewhere you can go? And they carted her off right away. Like they're like, we're going to take her to Mesa Lutheran. And we told them we'd go to our friend's parents' house, which we didn't. We just stayed in the apartment. And we went to the hospital later. She was in ICU. I remember looking through the window, and she had all these tubes and some black shit all over her. I think they used charcoal, and and so then we went home. We had some friends with us. And we went back the next evening to see how she's doing. And we walk in, and the nurse came up, and they're like, your mom left. She went AWOL, and she woke up, she took all the shit off of her, and she left. And she walked out of the hospital and just totally bailed. And they're like, if you see her or if she goes home, we need you to have her come back. And like, she should not have left. And we didn't see her for 5 years. We don't know where she went.
5 years?
5 years.
I was waiting for like 5 days.
Yeah.
No,
so she disappears.
She never came back. Yeah. She left the hospital, and we don't know where she went. She went presumably maybe to a drug dealer's house or whatever, wherever she went. But so now here, my brother's 17, I'm 16. We're in this apartment, which is like half empty. So picture like an apartment with like lawn furniture, right? And we slept on the floor on a blanket. We didn't even have a mattress, but and so yeah, she was gone. We don't know where she went or nothing. She just poof off into the wind. We stayed in that apartment for as long as we can, and we eventually got evicted. I had to drop out of school. My brother also dropped out of school, so we weren't going to high school. Once we got evicted, we ended up sleeping on the roof of a middle school for a couple of weeks. And then during the day, we would kind of linger around our school, around Westwood, and go hang out with some close friends, or we'd stay the night at a couple of friends. We kind of split up, and you'd couch surf here and there. And we ended up staying, one of my brother's girlfriend's mom, super nice lady. She took us in and let us live with her. So I was living with her, and so was my brother, and she was pretty wealthy, and she's like, look, if you live with me, you're going to have to go back to school. You're going to have to do these things. And we're like, sure. Right. Like, just let us live here, because we have nowhere to go. And so we did that, and it was rough. You're exploring, you're young, you're 16, 17, you don't have parents. You're going to go out and smoke pot all day. You're going to go out and drink, and you're going to do all the things that a teenager is going to do that doesn't have any parental guidance, and that is angry at the world. And so I just ended up working. I worked 2 jobs for a while, and me and my brother got our own place, and we had our own apartment, and we had friends, roommates. It was that we're, you know, my brother's 18, so we could sign a lease, and and then he turns 19, and I'm 18, and now we have this apartment. We have several different apartments. Don't get me wrong; there wasn't anything that was stable, but at least we had our own place, and we were doing good. We were making it. We were surviving, right? And we were thinking, you know, we could, you know, this is okay. Even though looking back on that, it wasn't okay. As like an adult, and I have my own children, right? I look back on that and go, holy shit, like, how did we get through all that? And how did we not end up in jail more than we already did for like underage alcohol consumption and things like that? But what had happened next is something that really, out of all the things in my story so far, all of that sucked, and all of it was really shitty. But what had happened to my brother was like the worst, is what really kind of like really turned me down the wrong road.
That's where we hit the pause button on this episode of Learn from People Who Lived It with Topher. We'll see you back here for part 2 when you're ready.
We have 3 goals with Learn from People Who Lived It. 1, to help you feel less alone. 2, encourage you to seek out a coach, a therapist, a church, anyone who can help you get through your journey and find some healing. 3, when you're ready, share your story with us.
Hi, it's Tim.
And Beth from the Mulhausen Group Real Estate.
Thank you for listening to Learn from People Who Lived It.
You can find them online at tmgphoenix.com. Thank you so much for spending a little time with us. We're about to listen to the lead track off the new album from Blaine Long called Bacon. A quick reminder that ASI-AV.com, that's that audio-visual company I was telling you about. This woman-owned company has more than 2 decades of experience, and if you're on the IT staff and you've got your next build-out, please reach out to these folks. They work with schools, they work with corporations, they work with just about everybody, and they pay really close attention to that last 5%. Visit them online at ASI-AV.com. Okay, Blaine Long and Bacon off the new album, Royal.
She bit my heart, she didn't break it. Well, she took a big bite, said it tastes like bacon. Lips like Presley, moves like Elvis. You forget about your heart when she shakes her pelvis. Hey. Oh, we got nights to dream and wings to fly. Still young, but not tonight. I wouldn't have it any other way. We got gravy boats and mortgage payments. It's been so long since I've seen the rain. It's where I'll be when I die. Where I'll be when I die. We got nights to dream and wings to fly. We're still young, but not tonight. I wouldn't have it any other way.